Hello YouTube, this is Salam. In this video I'm going to show you how I'm going to adapt two new aftermarket hydraulic cylinders to the lift cylinders of this bulldozer. I bought this bulldozer in 2013 and all the hydraulic cylinders, they were leaking. I already converted the two tilt cylinders or swing cylinders to aftermarket, and I did that in 2013 or 2014 while I was restoring this bulldozer, and they work out great. And actually I rebuilt both of these cylinders at the same time and they start leaking before this. The reason for that, there is some damage on the chrome rods, and one of these cylinders, the thread was damaged. It took a lot of effort to loosen these cylinders. They have Loctite or they seized, and one of them, the thread got damaged, so I had to build it with weld and rethread it and all that. The price of kit and the price of rod is so high, so this is a cheapest option and better option in my opinion, because you may face some corrosion inside the bore of these cylinders. Also, while I was restoring this bulldozer in 2013-2014, I thought about buying two used cylinders because I couldn't find a new one, and the used one, it cost about $1,200 or $1,200, and you buying a used part, it may be damaged or it may leak. So this, in my opinion, is better option. You could save this if you're into restoring antique machine. You could save this in the future. Once you want to restore it and put it into shape, you could restore the original one. However, if you want to use your machine like I'm doing over here, this is better option. And I show you how to convert this one to use these cylinders. I'm not going to show how to remove these cylinders. It's July in Texas and it's very hot, so I'm going to run the generator and I'll have some fan blowing air, and this may affect the performance of the camera. However, you need to plan your work. I'm going to run the bulldozer and raise it up and down till I be able to remove the bolts that keep the pin in place. And also, I find the best location to lose these hoses on both sides. This way, if I busted the hoses first, then the machine will be dead and this will be hard to do. So plan your work ahead of time, and I'm going to go ahead and remove these cylinders. And once I have them on the table, then I will come back and I'll show you how I'm going to do this. I hope you enjoyed this video. I was able to remove both cylinders and they came out easy. The way I done it, I raised the blade all the way up to be able to reach the bolt and backed it up so it doesn't spin. And I was able to remove these bolts on both sides. And I also removed the bolts that held the pin at this end. And then I lowered the blade all the way down. I put it on a free float. And I disconnected this pin. And I raised the cylinders. And I put a block of wood to support them. And then I run the machine again. And I pull the rod all the way into the cylinder using the machine power. And then I was able to move the cylinders so I could disconnect the hoses and pull the other pin out. The way I pull this pin, I use this pry bar and I pry the pin little bit until I have some clearance so I could use this needle nose plier, and I was able to pull it out this way and it came out easy. And then I disconnect the hoses all the way. I removed this fitting from the original cylinders and I put tape at the end of them to protect the inside from any contaminant, and I tie wrap them so they don't leak, and I have both cylinders on the table. When I adapted these cylinders to fit this, I just cut them where they used to be welded on the original cylinders, and I cut the attachment that was on this rod and I welded this directly over here. I removed this flange from the original cylinder that was on this bulldozer, and I cut the flange that came with this cylinder and I welded this directly. There is a machine surface inside, and this will fit inside the bore perfectly. It has a 3-inch diameter by about 1/4 inch. So when they weld it, it will be perfect. Both of these cylinders, they have 16-inch stroke. However, because these, they have deeper gland and deeper cylinder or wider in this dimension, it's longer than this. On the other swing cylinders, I bought 14-inch stroke because the original they were 14-inch stroke. However, when I laid them side by side like this, they were the same dimension as far from the weld over here to the gland. So I was able to just cut the part, this part over here, and this part. I cut the weld all the way and I exposed the inside of the bore, and I was able to cut the original part and I welded them directly to the swing cylinders. You need to make sure to clean the cylinder, make sure it doesn't have oil, and keep the plug open so pressure doesn't build, because when you weld this part, you're going to generate a lot of heat. I extended the rod all the way when I welded it so the heat doesn't damage the piston seal. And also, when you weld this part, you want this to be extended all the way to protect the gland seals. And I protected the rod with rags. I put a lot of rags and I kept putting water on it as I'm welding it. I also put 1.5 inch rod. I put 2 of them and made sure they parallel when I tag these in place. So these, they will be parallel to each other and it won't cause any issue, because if they're not welded right, then it may damage the piston, the gland, or may also not work correctly. However, these cylinders, they're a little bit shorter by about 1.75 inches. If I did the same thing like I did with the swing cylinders, if I cut this part all the way and I cut it right here, and then I cut this and welded them, it's going to be 1.75 inches shorter. I also have another problem with these cylinders. The original cylinders, when I raise the blade all the way up, the hoses for the cylinder that does this to the blade, they were touching the grill. So I need to even make these a little bit longer than the original. The way I'm going to do it, I'm just going to cut this part on this cylinder. I'm not going to expose the inside or the bore of this cylinder. I'm just going to cut this part. I will cut this part and I weld it to the outside of this one. And over here, I'm going to cut the rod about 2.5 inches longer than this part. And I will cut it right here and I will weld this to this and weld this over here. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to use 1.5 inch pipe or rod to check for parallel, make sure they're parallel and square to each other, and then I will tack them and I will weld them all the way. Also, a safety tip: be careful when you weld anything chrome plated. It's going to produce toxic fume, so make sure you do it outdoor. Make sure there is a fan, suck the air and blow it away from you so you don't inhale the smoke that's generated by the welding process. And the way I was able to pull these rods, I just connected them with a chain on the blade of the bulldozer. And on this one, I just used a small metal rod and I was able to pull it. On this one, I had to use the tractor to pull it all the way. And they both extended to maximum length. And I'm going to extend both of these when I cut them, so I could cut them to the dimension I want. I also want to make sure I extend the new cylinders all the way out, and I will trim this part, and I need to make sure I will have a precise measurement. When they both extended, they will measure the same from center hole to center hole. This way the blade, it doesn't have any stress on it, because if one cylinder a little bit taller or shorter than the other one, this may cause an issue when you raise or lower the blade. I extended both original cylinders to the maximum, and I took measurement from center hole to center hole on both of these cylinders. This one measured 45 and 5/8 inch. This one measured 45 and 3/4. The new cylinders, I'm going to try to achieve 46 inches from center hole to center hole. I also discovered when they welded these, they're not perfectly square. These rods, they 1.5 inches, the same size holes, and they straight. On this one, if I extend the rod all the way this way, as you see there is little bit of play. The square will touch at this end, and there is a gap over here. And if I take reading at this side, I have the same gap, but at the opposite end. So there is nothing wrong with the square or this rod. When they welded these cylinders, they didn't weld them perfectly square. I'm going to try to achieve perfect squareness when I weld these and these to the new cylinders. I am going to run the generator, and I will cut these right at the center of the weld. And when I weld them to these, after I cut this part, I'm going to weld them opposite to each other. As you see how they oriented right now, both holes, the one that hold the pin with the bolt, they both at this side. When I remove them from the machine, the one on the right side came out easy because this was away from the machine. On the left side, this was very close to the machine, and it was hard to get the wrenches to remove the bolts. So when I weld them, I will weld them opposite to each other. And now I'm ready. I'm gonna go ahead, run the generator, and cut these. I removed the paint and I grinded both ends so I could weld it better. And I'm going to use this stand to support the cylinder vertical. I also grinded these parts. And I will try to weld these right in the center. And this opening, I want it to be in line with these parts. What I mean in this direction. I will tack it at the side, and then I will check it with this. I will insert this rod and check the squareness at both sides. the hole for the bolt on this side, on this one. The next one, I will weld this oriented the other way. I still have to weld these all the way. I put 1-inch bead in 4 locations on each cylinders, and they're very strong. As you see, they both parallel to each other, and the rod is square to both cylinders. I would like to note, when I did the swing cylinders that tilt the blade, I removed this part completely from these cylinders, and I was able to insert these inside, so indexing was easier. However, in my opinion, this is better to not open the cylinder all the way. This way you prevent any contaminant from get inside, and also if you're beginner, to arc welding, so you don't have to worry about leak. When I welded the other cylinders, they didn't leak. I welded them, I put 2 beads all the way around using 70-18 rods, and they came out great. However, with this method, you don't even have to weld them all the way. You just make sure you have strong bead in about 4 locations, and you're good to go. Both of these rods, they extended all the way. And I took measurement from the end of the rods to the center of this rod, and I have 41.5 inches. I put both of these cylinders parallel to each other, and I put this rod square to this one and this one. And then I took measurement from the center of this rod to the square, 4.5 inches, and I put mark. So once I cut these rods at this mark, when I tack them to the end of these rods, I should have 46 inches from center hole to center hole, or from the center of this rod to the center of this rod over there. I am using these 2/4 inch flat stocks as spacers, and I clamped both cylinders to each other. This rod is free, still moving in and out. I cut these and I grounded the chrome from the rods, from these and from these rods. I want to make sure this rod is parallel to this one. .44 3/4 inch. Same thing. I also want to make sure this rod and this rod, they couple perfectly. also put some rags and duct tape to protect the chrome on these rods from the abrasive material when I cut everything and grinded everything. Once I'm ready to weld it all the way, then I will bring some wet rags to also protect these rods from getting hot. The heat will damage the chrome. "44 3/4. "44 3/4. And now I'm ready to weld them all the way. I have this plug loose so it doesn't build the pressure inside. I'm also going to weld over here because there is marking of the grinder when I remove this part from the original cylinder. I finished weld both of these cylinders and they came out great. I left the wet rag on the rod until everything cooled down. Then I removed that and carefully removed the duct tape, and we didn't damage the chrome. The chrome still looks great. The only thing left, I need to paint this part and this part to prevent rust, and once the paint is dry, then we install them and try them out. I flushed the hydraulic fluid and I decided to replace the hoses. 3 of them, they were in bad shape. I made this one the whole length as a hose, so I don't have to use this pipe. When I bought these cylinders, I also bought 4 fittings, number 8 boss, that's what goes here, and number 8 JIC male. I'm going to apply some grease and install this one over here. I also have some large size hose clamps. I'm going to support the hoses to the cylinder on both sides. I ran the machine, I checked for leaks. It doesn't leak. I installed all the covers, and now I'll run it and I'll show you this machine in action. I have good gap now.